Why do you laugh when we mourn? Amara paused, the laughter faltering for just a moment. She looked at Amadi, her eyes wide and full of mystery. I laugh because the dead have secrets, she said softly. The laughter is the only way I can hear them. In the heart of a village called Zuma, where the sun never failed to shine brightly and the earth was fertile, there lived a young woman named Amara. Amara wasn't like the other villagers. While everyone else went about their lives, planting crops, raising children, and celebrating their successes, Amara seemed detached, lost in her own thoughts, always a step removed from the rhythm of life. But what made Amara even more unusual and even frightening to the villagers was her uncontrollable laughter at funerals. It was the kind of laughter that echoed through the air, unsettling and unnerving, especially in the midst of mourning. In Zuma, death was treated with the utmost reverence. Funerals were sacred occasions where villagers would gather, mourn their loss, and pray for the departed souls. But every time someone died in the village, Amara would appear. She would always be there, standing at the edge of the crowd, her face masked by a strange smile. And just when the mourners began to weep and wail, Amara would start to laugh softly at first, then louder, until it became a wild cackling that would send shivers down the spines of even the bravest men. Some said it was a curse, others whispered that Amara was simply mad, but no one knew the truth. They all avoided her, crossed to the other side of the street when they saw her coming, and warned their children never to go near her. She brings death, they would say. Her laughter is the signal of doom. One of the most respected elders of the village, old Uzo, had heard the rumors about Amara, but he had never paid them much mind. He had lived a long life and had seen many strange things. Yet he never felt threatened by the young woman. Her laughter, while unsettling, seemed harmless to him, until one fateful day, the village was struck by a tragedy that would forever change its course. Old Uzo fell ill, and despite the best efforts of the village healers, he passed away quietly in his sleep. The villagers mourned deeply. Uzo was the last of the old guards, a man who had seen the village through its darkest times. His wisdom had guided them through the years of famine, war, and disease. It was said that the earth itself seemed to mourn his passing, as the crops began to wither and the winds grew colder. And then, just as the villagers gathered to pay their respects, at the funeral, Amara arrived. She stood by the side of the grave, her laughter beginning to bubble up, uncontrollable as ever. The mourners exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared to say anything to her. After all, she was an outsider, someone who didn't belong, someone who lived on the edge of the village, outside the norms of society. But as Amara laughed, something unexpected happened. A young man, Amadi, stepped forward. He was Uzo's son, a strong and kind-hearted man who had inherited his father's wisdom and love for the village. Amadi had always been protective of his father and had respected him deeply, but this laughter, this strange, unsettling laughter touched something inside of him. It didn't feel right. Something about it, about Amara, seemed connected to the death of his father. Why do you laugh? Amadi asked, his voice firm but filled with a quiet sadness. Why do you laugh when we mourn? Amara paused, the laughter faltering for just a moment. She looked at Amadi, her eyes wide and full of mystery. I laugh because the dead have secrets, she said softly. The laughter is the only way I can hear them. The words hung in the air, thick with meaning. Amadi, though confused, felt a surge of curiosity. There was something in Amara's words, something that made him uneasy and yet determined to understand. Perhaps, just perhaps, Amara knew something that no one else did. Perhaps she held the key to the dark mystery that had surrounded his father's death. Tell me what you know, Amadi urged, stepping closer to Amara. What is it you hear? Amara's lips curled into a faint, cryptic smile. The dead speak in whispers, she said, and I hear them when I laugh. They tell me things that the living cannot understand. Amadi felt a shiver run down his spine. He had grown up hearing tales of spirits and ancestors, but he had never put much stock in them. Now, standing before this strange woman, he began to wonder if there was some truth to those stories. Are you saying my father? Amadi's voice faltered, the words hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. Your father was not meant to die, Amara said, her voice quiet but filled with conviction. There is something wrong here, something that no one dares speak of. You must uncover the truth before the village is consumed by its own darkness. With those words, Amara turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the trees that bordered the village. Amadi stood there, watching her, his mind racing. What was she trying to tell him? What did she know that the rest of the villagers didn't? The next few days passed in a blur. Amadi couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. His father's death, though natural on the surface, seemed convenient, too sudden. He had never been ill before. He had always been strong, always been a pillar of the village, and now, he was gone, and Amara's laughter had been the only thing that made him question everything. Determined to uncover the truth, Amadi decided to seek out Amara. He found her at the edge of the forest, as she often was, sitting alone, her eyes distant, as though she were listening to something that no one else could hear. I need your help, Amadi said, his voice urgent. You said my father's death was not what it seemed. I need to know what happened. Amara's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, Amadi saw a flicker of sadness in her expression. It is not just your father, Amadi, she said, softly. There have been others before him, deaths that were not what they seemed. There is a darkness in Zuma, a curse that has been placed upon this village. Amadi's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The elders of the village, Amara began. They are not who they appear to be. They have made a pact with forces beyond our understanding, forces that demand blood, that crave destruction. And your father, like the others before him, was a sacrifice. Amadi's blood ran cold. His father, a sacrifice. Do what? And why? Amara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a barely audible whisper. There is a hidden truth in the heart of the village, buried deep beneath the ground, but it will not remain hidden for long. The spirits of the dead are restless, and they will not find peace until the truth is revealed. Amadi's mind reeled with the implications of what Amara was saying. He had never suspected that the village elders, the very men who had shaped the history of Zuma, could be involved in such dark dealings. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it all made sense. The strange deaths, the whispers in the wind, the way the village seemed to be slowly dying from the inside out. It all pointed to something sinister, something that had been hidden for years. I will find the truth, Amadi vowed, his voice strong and resolute. I will uncover the secrets of Zuma, no matter the cost. Amara nodded, her expression unreadable. Be careful, Amadi. She warned, the path you walk is dangerous. There are forces at play here that you cannot even begin to understand. But if you are determined, I will help you. I will guide you. With those words, Amara stood and turned to leave, but before she disappeared into the trees, she looked back at Amadi. Her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't place. Remember, she said softly, the truth is not always what you want it to be, and with that, she was gone, leaving Amadi standing alone in the fading light of the afternoon. The village of Zuma was a place of peace and prosperity, but now, Amadi understood, it was a place steeped in darkness, a darkness that had been hidden for years, a darkness that would destroy everything he held dear if he did not act. With Amara's cryptic words in his mind, Amadi set off on his dangerous journey. He had to uncover the truth. He had to expose the betrayal that had been buried for so long. But as he walked through the village, a nagging doubt began to grow in his mind. Would the truth set them free? Or would it tear the village apart forever? As night fell, Amadi knew that the answers he sought lay in the depths of Zuma's darkest secrets, and he was determined to uncover them no matter what the cost. Amadi's journey had only just begun. But already, the weight of the task ahead pressed heavily on his shoulders. As the village of Zuma settled into its evening quiet, the shadows stretched long, casting an eerie glow across the familiar paths he once walked so confidently. Now, everything seemed to have changed, tainted by suspicion and fear. Determined to get to the bottom of his father's death, Amadi knew he had to confront the elders, the very people who had ruled over the village with unchallenged authority. They were the ones who had performed the last rites for his father. They were the ones who had buried the truth deep beneath the soil, but it was not easy to approach them. The elders were old and powerful, and their words carried weight in the village. If Amadi were to accuse them of anything, he risked drawing suspicion upon himself, but the knowledge gnawed at him. He had to know. He decided to start with one elder in particular, Elder Nwosu, a man who had been his father's closest friend. Amadi remembered the stories his father used to tell of their childhood together, of how they had fought side by side to defend the village from raiders. It was hard to imagine that such a man could be involved in anything dark, but Amadi was learning that appearances could be deceiving. It was late when Amadi found Nwosu sitting by his hut, the dim glow of a fire casting shadows on his weathered face. The old man looked up when Amadi approached, his eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Amadi, Elder Nwosu said softly, what brings you here at this hour? I need to speak with you, Elder, Amadi replied, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of his thoughts. "It's about my father." The old man's face softened, his lips trembling slightly as he looked at Amadi. "Your father was a great man. His loss, it has devastated us all." Amadi sat down beside him. "I don't understand, elder. There was no sign that my father was sick. He didn't even complain about any pain. How could he just die like that?" Elder Nwosu sighed, his eyes clouded with emotion. "Sometimes the world is not as it seems, my son. There are forces beyond our understanding, and not all of them are good." Amadi's heart pounded in his chest. "What forces are you talking about? What happened to my father?" The elder looked down, his hands trembling as he spoke. "There are things in this village, secrets we have kept for generations, powers that we made a pact with long ago, powers that demand sacrifices." He paused, his voice low. "Your father was one of those sacrifices." Amadi's mind spun, his world tilting on its axis. "You mean, he was murdered?" "No," Elder Nwosu said quickly, shaking his head. "Not murdered, but chosen. We have kept the peace in this village for years through a bargain with the spirits that protect us. But to maintain that protection, we must offer them something in return. Your father was the one chosen this time. His death was not of his own making, but it was necessary to keep the village safe." Amadi sat in stunned silence, the words ringing in his ears like a distant bell. "So, my father was not just a victim of illness, but of some ancient pact. Some arrangement made long before I was born." The elder nodded solemnly. "Yes, Amadi, and you, too, are part of that legacy. The spirits demand balance. If we do not honor our part of the pact, they take more. Your father was the price for the protection of the village, and it is a debt we must all pay." Tears filled Amadi's eyes. His father, a man who had fought so hard for the well-being of this village, had been sacrificed without even knowing it. The injustice of it all made his blood boil, but deep down, he felt a growing sense of understanding. This village, the one that had been home to generations, was not as peaceful as it appeared. The darkness that had lingered in the shadows was now clear to him. He stood up abruptly. "I can't accept this. I can't just let my father's death be in vain. I will uncover the truth, no matter the cost." Elder Nwosu's eyes widened with alarm. "You must be careful, Amadi. The truth you seek may tear this village apart. There are forces at play here that you cannot control." But Amadi was resolute. "I don't care. I will expose the truth." And with that, he turned and left the elder's hut. The weight of his resolve hardening with each step. Amadi didn't return to his home that night. Instead, he made his way to the village's sacred grounds, where the spirits of their ancestors were said to rest. Amara had mentioned that the truth was buried deep beneath the village. Maybe, just maybe, there was something hidden there that could reveal the final pieces of the puzzle. The moon hung low in the sky as Amadi reached the sacred grounds. He walked through the tall grass, feeling the air grow colder. The village felt far away now, distant in a way that made him feel both free and lost. He approached a stone circle in the center of the grounds, where the elders often held their ceremonies. There, he felt a strange pull, as if the earth itself was calling him. Without knowing exactly why, Amadi began to dig. He dug with a frantic energy, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. What was he looking for? What had been buried here so long ago? But as his hands hit something hard, his breath caught in his throat. He cleared the dirt away to reveal an ancient stone chest, its surface covered in strange markings. With trembling hands, Amadi opened the chest. Inside, there was a scroll yellowed with age and covered in faded ink. The scroll held the ancient agreement, the pact between the villagers and the spirits. It was a promise made centuries ago, one that had been passed down through generations. It spoke of protection, of peace, and of the price that had to be paid. Amadi's heart clenched as he read the words. His father had been right. The village had been under a curse, bound by a pact that no one dared speak of. But this pact was not a simple agreement. It had been twisted over the years, manipulated by the elders for their own gain. And now, Amadi understood, the village had been trapped in a cycle of sacrifice, with each generation paying the price for the safety and prosperity they enjoyed. It was no longer a matter of honoring an old promise. It was a matter of freeing the village from its shackles. Amadi's mind raced. How could he break this cycle? How could he stop the bloodshed? And just as the question formed in his mind, a soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "You found it, didn't you?" Amara's voice was calm, but there was a quiet urgency in it as well. Amadi turned, startled, and saw her standing in the moonlight, her eyes glowing with an almost ethereal light. "Amara," he said, his voice hoarse. "You knew?" She nodded. "I knew the truth." The spirits have been calling out, restless and angry, demanding justice. The elders have been keeping them at bay, but the price is too high. It's time to stop the cycle. But how? Amadi asked, his voice breaking. Amara stepped forward, her eyes filled with understanding. You must take the scroll to the elders and show them what they've done. You must make them see the price they've been paying, and make them break the pact once and for all. Amadi looked down at the scroll in his hands, the weight of his decision pressing on him. He knew that doing this would change everything, that it could destroy the village he loved, but he also knew that it was the only way to give his father and all the others before him the peace they deserved. With Amara's guidance, Amadi walked back to the village. As the first rays of dawn broke over Zuma, he stood before the elders. The sun rose higher, casting a golden light over the village, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold truth. I have the scroll, Amadi said, his voice steady. The truth cannot be hidden any longer. The elders were silent as Amadi unfurled the ancient agreement and showed them the price they had paid for pay. Ace. It was a painful moment for all of them, but in that silence, something shifted. The darkness that had clouded the village for so long began to lift, and for the first time in years, Amara's laughter no longer echoed through the village. Instead, there was peace that came not from sacrifice, but from the truth. The villagers, though shaken, began to rebuild. They were no longer bound by a curse, no longer shackled by ancient pacts, and as Amadi stood in the heart of the village, his father's spirit finally at rest, he looked to Amara. She smiled, her eyes soft with understanding. Thank you, he whispered. Amara's laughter, soft and gentle now, filled the air, but this time, it was the laughter of a woman who had found peace, a woman who had freed a village from its past. And with that, Zuma was reborn.